Hey everybody, it's Terry Records and welcome to the Tiny House Movement. We are going to get started with the Tiny House Movement and its impact on the United States in about 5 minutes. This is our countdown, and I'm going to begin screen sharing a little slideshow I prepared for you. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to begin in about 5 minutes. I'm going to keep admitting people to the room. And if everybody would like to drop your name and where you're from in the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screen, that would be great. I can't quite see it when I'm doing my presentation, so but we will catch up with it in a bit. And these are just some slides that I prepared, I gathered. This is actually the first property was a tiny house we had in Southwest Florida that was featured on Tiny House Nation. So anyway, enjoy, and we will chat in a few minutes. I kind of like them when they're under the floor like that because you don't have to climb up those narrow stairs. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're getting started in just a couple minutes. I'm still admitting people to the room. You've got a chat at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to drop your name and where you're from in the chat. Also, if you have any questions along the way, we'll answer those at the end as we progress. So we'll get started in about 1 minute. These are just ideas of different tiny houses that are out there. A lot of people think they have to be on wheels, and they don't. And there are lots of forms of tiny houses out there. So this is actually a listing I had at one point. Their decorating's a little older, but a couple from Michigan. And welcome. All right. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'm Terry Records, and I'm a real estate investment coach. And we have some guests on the line today, and we probably will have some more people joining us as well. We want to make it as helpful to you as possible. We're going to open it up for questions at the end. And so we've got a lot of information to cover, but we want to make it very meaningful to you as well. So with me today, I have Dr. Serge Thomas and Demetria Webster, and then some women of the Oilfield in North Dakota, Laurel King and Jocelyn Nordhaugen. She's actually my daughter-in-law. And so we're going to I'm going to have them speak as we go to 1 second. Let me, for some reason, it was supposed to admit everybody without trying, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead. I think I've got it. But as I said, I'm married to Jason Nordhaugen, and we're real estate investment coaches. We've got 3 kids between us. We have been building wealth with real estate. I'm known as the Millionaire Mom. I took a $5,000 inheritance up to $6.5 million back before I met Jason, and I met him along the way, actually. And so our kids have been involved with real estate with us for a long time. We own multiple businesses, a construction company, coaching company, and real estate company as well. I've been in the business about 31 years and done over 3,500 transactions, and my forte is really helping people build wealth with real estate. I've got a book coming out, and less than a week I start my tour for my book, and it's my story of how I took $5,000 to $6.5 million. And those concepts are what I teach people. And you might wonder, why is somebody who does all this doing tiny houses? And it's because it's all real estate, right? Everybody has a different dream, and it's a matter of how do we get and fulfill that dream. So that's what we're going to be sharing with you today. I have some things that I really love in life. Of course, my husband, my kids, my grandkids, and my Labrador retrievers. I also love helping other people attain their goals with real estate. My dream is to spend a month at my cabin in Montana. I'm hoping July this year. And our other thing that we love to do is just travel in our RV, which is its own form of tiny house. And so that's actually what we're doing right now. We're actually out in North Dakota in the oil field. So today what we are going to do is we're going to talk about the tiny house movement and who's interested in it. And you'd be surprised, there's a lot of people interested in the tiny house movement, and why. There's lots of different reasons why. There's different types of homes and how you can get started. Like I said, we have a lively guest panel. We're going to cover some green, tiny living, North Dakota's oil field, the homelessness in America, and maybe vacation property opportunities as well that come along with tiny houses. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. And I just want to open your minds up, because a lot of people, I found, they see those shows on TV, and they're like, well, that's not really quite for me. But the idea is tiny houses may be for you in a different way. So I take the approach of exposing you to lots of different things, and then seeing what it is that turns you on, right? And so that's what I'm going to do now. So the tiny house movement really is still in its grassroots. It's in an infancy stage, and it's a movement. It's about opening up people's eyes to an alternative way of life than what we've been taught for generations. I mean, my folks, when I grew up, some of us older people, our parents were always told, you have to buy a bigger house. You always have to buy bigger and bigger. And the government even made it a tax incentive. If you always bought a bigger house, you didn't have to pay taxes. Well, you don't have to do that anymore, thank goodness. But it was it was how it was processed. People, it was in their head, you always had to buy bigger, right? And that's not it anymore. And a lot of people are realizing that that's not necessarily what they want in life anymore. And so actually this tiny house movement is changing demographic patterns as well. So a tiny house is not just a home. And what I want to say, it's a lifestyle. A tiny is relative to the person who occupies the space. So it can be 200 square feet or it can be 1,200 square feet. It's just a matter of you. I've lived in a 4,000 square foot house, and for me, 400 square feet might be small, or 1,200. It doesn't matter. It matters about whether that is what you need, right? So going smaller. So a family with 2 kids, 1,200 square feet might be tiny. So that's okay. So I don't want you to get hung up in square footages, which I think some people do. But it must be an intentional design and arrangement that's focused on the effective use of space, rather than, a lot of people only use 20% of their house. So what if you were to focus on that 20% that you actually use of your house and make it functionally work, and so that you don't have to waste all that other spaces, right? It also relies on good design to meet the needs of its residents, and it's a vehicle for you to be able to pursue a new intentional lifestyle. The essence of a tiny house is not about square footage, as I said, the space-saving storage, or a particular style or design. It's a structure that provides everything you need to live your life in the most efficient, cost-effective manner, making it possible for you to improve your quality of life in your interactions with other people while realizing your dreams. I've heard that a lot of times. People who I actually found it myself when I went smaller, and we've been in a tiny house for a few years now, and when I've done that, I am outside more. I interact, I do things more than I did. Otherwise, if I'm in a big house, I stay inside. So who's interested in tiny houses? Everybody, really. Generation X, the millennials, baby boomers, and our elderly parents. There's a lot of reasons, and I'm going to show you some more and see where maybe you fit in this. Why tiny houses? Now, the purpose behind a tiny house is different to everyone. There are those people who are the do-it-yourself mentality. You know, I want to build something myself, and building a big house is too much. Maybe I'm going to get a trailer like this and build it on this platform, and I can do it in my spare time, and then I have my own house that I've made, right? Or going back to the land, right? Maybe living off the grid is something, you know, being able to conserve, right? Other people really like a unique space. And homelessness. Now, homelessness is a big issue in our country, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Demetria is going to help us with that. Time. A lot of people find that if you have less space to maintain, you have more time. Maybe also if your tiny house is not so expensive, right? You're affording this big home before. Maybe the tiny house doesn't cost as much, so you don't have to make as much money at your job in order to be able to afford a tiny house, right? It gives you freedom, whether you can, like this house is one that is on wheels. TOW is another term they call it, tiny house on wheels, and it's towable, right? But maybe it doesn't have to be on wheels. Maybe it's just small and you can lock it up and you can leave. Condominiums, I see a lot of small condominiums. People like that idea for a condominium or a small house, is there's not as much to maintain. Gives you freedom to be able to go do other things. Maybe you can afford to have 2 locations that you live in. Like I have a cabin in Montana on top of the mountain, and so that is a tiny space as well, and so it's real easy to leave that and go away. Finances, it can be very affordable. Also addressing them, as I said. One sec, let me see if I can get my slides to work. There we go. So who's interested? Affordable housing, eco-friendly investors. I'm going to show you in a little bit a tiny house that Jason and I picked up a couple years ago, and we just finished the rehab, and now it is a vacation rental. It's available for daily rental or weekly or monthly. Investors and builders, a lot of people are interested in creating communities for different reasons, for all of these different reasons, whether you want to serve the homeless. So you have to think about, who is it I'm going to serve? Am I serving the homeless, or am I going to serve our baby boomers? You know, the places that you build for each will be very different. You will not put granite countertops probably for the homeless, but for the baby boomers, they want it all tricked out, right? So you have to kind of think about that and decide what it is that you want and who is it that you're trying to serve when you're doing this tiny house community. Also, low custom ownership, more independence and freedom, and being very practical as well. So people, mortgage free. A lot of people, want to be able to have their house paid down. Depending on where you live, housing can be very expensive. So if you buy a tiny house, it's a lot of times it's something that maybe you could actually, if you sell your existing house, maybe you can own this tiny house free and clear, right? Like I said, some people salvaged or reclaimed supplies. In the tiny house that Jason and I did, the Key Western that I'm going to show you, we harvested, we got some wood from an original house on Sanibel Island, and made our countertops on our kitchen out of heart of pine, and then we actually trimmed the doors out of some of the wood that was in some of these other houses too. So you can save and use reclaimed materials as well. So this type of a house is on a trailer bed. So this is one type that can go. This is what you typically would have seen on those shows, and they're very interesting. But you notice that the walls, this does not have any. It's only so wide so that it can go down the road. And so sometimes in the RVs, you'll notice when we go through a few other pictures, they have slides that come out and this kind of a thing. So that actually affords you more room. Or you could possibly build your tiny house on a trailer bed where it had slides as well. That gives you just a titch more room as well. Another form of tiny house has been around a long time is a recreational vehicle. And this is pretty common these days. If you go and you Google retro RV, you'll see there's a big craze about renovating these RVs and tripping them out according to today's standards. But you know, they do build these RVs. They've been doing it for a long time. So what I found, I went in, I'm used to living in an RV, but then I had someone in Southwest Florida come from, they had been on Tiny House Nation, and they had their one that they have built for, it was called the Humble Abode, for the show. But it was very small feeling because it didn't have as many things built into its spaces. Whereas what you'll find in RVs like this is everything is built in. So underneath cushions, all of those, it's either turns into a bed or there's storage. And so they've been doing it a long time. So RVs are very adept at going down the road. Now this one is my dream RV. It has 2 decks. So this is what's called a toy hauler, and it has a back garage, so you could put a 4-wheeler in it. And then this back door comes down and you have a deck, and that actually has a deck over here. So that's my goal in the next 2 years, is to own one like that. Has awnings and then, you know, king size bed and everything else inside. So they're all tripped out. Very nice, depending on what you want. Otherwise, there's another thing called a granny pod, and a lot of us have elderly parents, and you know, we have this problem because all of a sudden people need more assistance. So do you uproot them and bring them to you, or do you uproot yourself and go live with them for the last few years? So granny pods, there are some businesses that deliver granny pods. In this case, these look like they were, maybe this one here was delivered, right? But this one looks like it was built more, you know, so that it matched the structure that's there. I've seen them where they move them in on a flatbed as well. Of course, if you're going to do something like a granny pod, you have to check your zoning ordinances and those kinds of things, because not every community will allow you to put an additional structure on there. But it is a way to help meet that need, right? So another form of these types of tiny homes have been around a long time, and those are our manufactured homes. And you will see them if you go to Florida, Arizona, you see lots and lots of manufactured homes. They've been doing it since the 60s. And so a lot of people had second homes in these areas, and that's how they do it. And generally, these are kind of permanent. They are movable, but they are still building them new as well. So they are stick built, and so it is an option as well. And then what I want to bring your attention to are houses, and what a lot of times when you're building them, originally like the ones on wheels, it was very, very hard to get financing. I have heard that there are more financing alternatives coming up for them now than there were, and as time progresses it will be easier and easier. But another thing you could do is look at existing housing and renovate it. In this case, this house looks like it is a newer house. Now, to go tiny in a community, you have to be very careful, because if you're going to build new, each community has minimum building standards. So you would have to check with your county and your city ordinances before you ever purchase anything. And I did have a woman call me this week, and she had just bought land, and she expected to put tiny on there. And you can't just assume you can put tiny on there, because your county and your city are going to have restrictions. And so some of them, for example, Cape Coral, Florida, their minimum building restriction, I think it was 1,100 square feet. So if I wanted an 800 square foot house, it wasn't going to work. And so with pressure over time, some of those communities are allowing or are changing their rules to suit the pressure that they're getting. So you want to keep checking with those entities, and every county and every city are not the same. So in our area in Southwest Florida, there's a county to the north that's more open and less restrictive, but some of the other counties are more restrictive. And so, for example, the tiny house I said that had been on Tiny House Nation, they had to park it in the field because they could not live in it at the time, right? So houses, if you're building them new. Now, if it's an existing house, for example, the house that Jason and I renovated most recently, it had been built in the 1960-ish. And so I renovated it instead. And so there wasn't any restrictions on that. So another way is condominiums, townhouses, and co-ops. For example, this middle picture, you can see they've got their bed. It's a hide-a-bed here. So using, having versatile space. The kitchen's all there too, but I'm sure that TV, well, maybe it doesn't, but you can build your TVs to go up and down, all kinds of things, so that your space is very very self-sufficient and contained as well. So there's lots of ways to do that. Another way is possibly to do it on a boat. That's one of my dreams, is to live on a boat for 2 years, and I'm just putting it out there. And in this case, they do make houseboats, have been around for a long time. There's great alternatives with houseboats. Then you can see other people that are taking pontoons and they're building structures there as well. As soon as you make something that has to go down the highway, you have to be concerned, and I'm not sure about waterways, but like for the ones that are on the trailers that we were looking at a few minutes ago, you have to be concerned with the DOT, and there are certain guidelines you have to follow in order to do that. And there are places that can certify you as well. So there's some options if you want to be in a boat, right? Do you want a secluded or rural setting? So this looks pretty remote. I have a little cabin that's about 8 by 10 that I am going to make a tiny place for people to, and I'm going to come to and put the kitchen outside. Of course, it's only a 3-season type of a cabin this summer. We'll be doing that. An urban setting. So again, this looks like it's in the middle of a neighborhood. So you have to be very concerned if that city will allow you to do this. Or it could be that it was a garage converted, but if you're going to habitate and have somebody sleep there, you've got to make sure it's okay. Otherwise, you can get shut down after you put all that time and effort and money into it, right? So be very careful. Do you want a coastal setting? In this case, this one's on wheels. They can move it, but so that's a great alternative. Sometimes there's in some of the coastal settings, we moved our RV to a spot that's in a flood zone today. It's not on the coast in North Dakota, but it's on water. And so if it should flood in a coastal setting and you're on wheels, then you can at least pick it up and move it, right? And so you might find some interesting places to be if you have that ability to move it and it's okay with the municipality that you're at. Now, I find that some people might give up the house for the setting. What do I mean by that? I mean, so many of us, we qualify for so much house, right? And so if I want to live in this neighborhood, this is the price range of the house. But what if I took what I could afford and I moved it to a beautiful lake lot, right? Maybe I could afford more house if I was actually, took that affordability and moved it to an unusual spot where I normally couldn't afford to be there. Maybe this is $1 million view, but then it's not $1 million house, right? So you might look at something like that where you're giving up something else, maybe that big neighborhood, to live in a setting that you really, really want to be in, right? So let's see where else I'm at here. Hard with all the light on me here. So we've done, okay, here we go. I know where I'm at now. I almost know where I'm at. One sec. Okay. Do you want to be in a community of tiny houses? And this is a alternative. A lot of communities, for example, Cape Coral, Florida, what they're saying is we don't want small houses less than our 1,100 square feet, but if we do allow them, we're going to have them all be in a certain area, planned development, and that way they aren't affecting the rest of the neighborhood. And what the reason a city might think like that would be because, say I've got a $500,000 house and then somebody builds a 500 square foot house next door to mine, and it's not the same value as my house, and so I might perceive that to not be equal, right? And so people wouldn't like that, especially later on when they're used, and so the city is trying to protect values. But if the city says, okay, but we're going to let this community be built and they're all the same and they're in this community, so that's why you might see them be more open to that. And so you can kind of see some different alternatives here as well. A community to solve the homelessness, and we're going to go through that. Demetria is going to share with us some of that, or maybe on somebody else's property. I thought it was really funny when I was watching all those tiny house shows when they're on wheels, and every time this young couple would be on there, and they're like, "Well, yeah, we live on Mom and Dad's property," and so that you can do, and they got them on wheels. You can go and stay on somebody else's property and maybe rent a space, and if it's allowable for that that area. Do you want to be transient? So you have to be DOT certified in order to go down the road. For sure, RVs are certified, but if you're going to build something on wheels, you want to make sure you can do that as well. And you've got to, height. You have height restrictions and width restrictions and all of that as well. Now, our retired people, maybe you want to just travel. Maybe you want to go to state parks, national parks, local resorts. So you want to check. Not all the tiny houses like this on wheels are allowed in every RV park. Some of them will allow them and some of them won't. So you have to kind of check around before you go. Or do you want to be in a community with other diverse homes? In this case, this one is not in a diverse homes, but it's just for sale, it looks like. But it could be, an eclectic group of homes. Or do you want to do it full or part-time? My little cabin on top of the mountain in Montana it's part-time, right? We don't have water up there, so it's not full-time. But is it something that you want to do? Eco-friendly, an eco-friendly community. And sustainability. This is a big concern, and there's a lot of people who are interested in that. In this case, there are planned communities as well for that. So be a part of that. You could just have to Google and you'll find lots of this information. But I do want to really emphasize that there are local building codes and county codes, like I said, the DOT. Those are all big concerns, and do not go buy anything until you have checked these things out, because I've seen way too many people waste their money and not be able to do what they thought they were going to be able to do. Now, the ability to resell too. So far, I haven't seen appreciation going when things are movable as much as when houses are on foundations. Typically, my RV goes down in value, right? And the same thing, my house generally goes up in value. So if you're looking for resaleability and appreciation, do you have to be on wheels? Can you have a tiny house that's on a foundation? Maybe you can improve the property and it'll be worth more. So you want to think about that. Is it hard to resell or not? If it's on wheels, you can't get a 30-year mortgage, right? If it's on a foundation, you can get a 30-year mortgage, and you can, you can finance it over a longer period of time, which makes the payments smaller as well. So appreciation versus depreciation, ways to finance. A lot of the tiny houses that are stick-built on a towable platform, it is hard to finance them, especially if you're doing it yourself. If you buy an RV that is a typical RV, then you can get a 20-year loan depending on your qualifying, right? So you have to kind of figure those things. So if I was looking at an RV or having the cash to build one, I might like to build one, but do I have the time? I can buy one today and have a payment of $200 and hit the road. Do you have land to store it on? Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to present some case studies, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to kind of clip through this. This is too long to start with, but this is, Jason and I did a tiny house. We found this tiny house in North Fort Myers a couple years ago. And we'll see if it will skip through while I'm zooming. And I've named it the Key Western now, and I'm going to talk over myself here because you can see this is where we're just purchasing it. There was an above ground pool here. Lots and lots of vegetation. You can't even see the house at this point. So this house was on an auction, and it became available. It was on the market for $99,000, and I saw it, and it was just a small little house, and it was on some water. I didn't even know if you could get out to the river, but actually it's like a 2-minute ride from the boat to the main river, 10 minutes to downtown Fort Myers. The roof was leaking significantly. The decking is bad. And I'm going to kind of click through so you don't have to watch the whole thing. I'll just narrate. And so what happened is we had to take the whole roof of this house off. But it was built in the early 1960s. So the kitchen, you can see, is a tuck-in over here. We ended up pulling it out to this main dining space because it was kind of a waste. It's a small house, but this dining space was wasted. So you'll see how I made it a retro Key Western kitchen in a second. So we moved the kitchen, and we actually changed our minds from everything we're talking about here. You can see this whole video on YouTube if you go to rentfliprun.com. And here we're still discussing which way to do this kitchen. We actually get in a little fight during the video. Not a fight, but I decide differently how to do it than he does, of course. Doggone it. I can't. I'm trying to forward it. It's not helping me right now. 1 second. Okay, let's see. So it basically has a teeny bathroom. Here's how you get into the kitchen. And behind Jason here is a really small bathroom. He ended up pulling this wall out and making it bigger. And then there was 2 small bedrooms behind us here. And what we ended up doing is opening up those 2 bedrooms into 1 bigger bedroom and making a closet inside so you can see the mold in the ceiling there. And this was an office. I guess I missed the bedroom for you. There is another structure behind us here, and when we go in that structure, the best thing Jason says is there's a concrete floor. So we ended up tearing down that and leaving the concrete floor in here. Eventually we'll build a loft, and I'm going to put a shed there with a glass or plexiglass glass garage door so that it goes up, and then you have a loft above in this structure. But right now we removed it. And so this is the after, and we have converted it just as of a month ago to a vacation rental. There is no grass because it's dry season and I did not do irrigation. But this is the Key Western. This is the after. The above ground pool I converted to a koi pond, and I hope the grass grows back. We bought it for $65,000. It was on for $99,000. They reduced it in the middle of the auction, and we got it for $65,000. And my koi got really big too. I didn't get a close up of them. All right. Well, thank you. And I would like to introduce, that house is available for daily, weekly, or monthly rental. And it's like $75 a day. With that, I would like to introduce Dr. Serge Thomas and the Hobbit House. So Serge, you want to join me this afternoon and tell us about what you're doing here?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, terrific. So this is actually not really a tiny home, but this is an ecologically friendly home. So it's bigger than your tiny home because it's about 2,400 square foot. However, it's modular, so you can actually build it much smaller. So as you can see here, that's an aerial view taken from about 400 feet. And basically, it's a company called Formworks Building in Colorado, and they sell those kits that people can buy and build their own little Hobbit home. So the way it comes is it comes with these big loops, as you can see here, and you have to add some rebar. So there's a bunch of rebar here, and then underneath the loops and the rebars, you have some styrofoam, which will be used as a form when the shotcrete is being poured. So imagine a swimming pool where you have people, you know, shotcreting the inside of the swimming pool. So it's like the swimming pool, but inverted. Right?
Oh.
So basically hire, you know, swimming pool guys, and they come there and they shotcrete. So it's a concrete that's very low water content, and it's being pulverized onto the structure, and the foam underneath it is holding the concrete until it cures. Then after 2-3 days, you remove the foam that's inside, and you also have to add a membrane to waterproof it, as well as a wick fabric to get the moisture out of the structure. And then you cover it with between 3 for this dome, between 3 and 16 foot of dirt. And then you end up with what we call a barrel vault with green roof. So the advantage is really that you save a lot of electricity because heating and cooling is very low. The dirt basically has a very high heat capacity, meaning that your temperature will not change very easily. We visited a few in Central Florida, and just to change the temperature by a few degrees, it takes about a couple of weeks. And in terms of energy, we visited also another home in Central Florida, and they had 4,000 square foot, and their electricity bill was less than $100 per month. So the other advantage of it is that it's hurricane resistant, obviously, and also earthquake, if we had earthquake here, as well as it's very good regarding the nutrient that will come with atmospheric fallout. So people like I'm an ecologist. So the idea is you won't have as much of a rainfall flush after it rains. So the runoff will be pretty much delayed or even canceled out. And the plants and the soil microbe will filter the water. So there is very little nutrient exceeding that dome. So so we've been pretty much 3 years through the process because the issue was not to get actually the permitting. I live in Fort Myers, Florida, and the county actually loves the project. The problem was actually to get the financing. So each time we went through the underwriting stage with 3 different banks, they couldn't find a structure that was similar within a 50-mile radius, and that was a no-go. So I decided to sell my home. I had a rental over in Miami, so I sold it at a little condo, and was able to build it about 3/4 through, and we're still about 1/4 to finish the inside now. So now it's completely covered with dirt and completely closed. We're putting the windows and the doors, and then we're gonna have to hopefully move in about 6 months.
So there's windows in the front.
Right.
Yes, good.
Yeah.
I was wondering about light. Good.
Yeah, so there's a lot of light. There's if you see on the top, there's a cupola. So the cupola is about 26 feet in the air, and it allows the warm air to exit. In terms of cooling, we're thinking just one little Mitsubishi mini split per the builder recommendation. He said if you think you might want a second one, you might, but normally one should be enough to cool the entire home. I'm not sure if you're aware, they're very low energy and they run all the time. So there is no kick with the compressor. It's runs all the time at low level. So we also have a facade, as you can see, when you actually at ground level, people don't see that it's an earth dome because it's like an illusion. So we see the facade with a low roof. However, it's completely covered with dirt, like I said, between 3 and 16 feet of dirt.
So is the main structure, is that where your kitchen and your living room are, and then you have your bedrooms on the side? Is that how you organized it, or?
Correct. So the central dome is a gigantic, well, main room, I would say, with a kitchen. And then we have two little, actually they look like tunnels, two little tunnels on the sides, and the small one has 2 bedrooms, and the large one has a master bedroom as well as an art studio at the back. My wife does arts.
Great, great. And so what, if you don't mind, how much cost is that by the time you're done? Do you think you're going to be into it?
All right. So like you, we were actually looking at auctions. So we got the land pretty cheap. It was just after the turndown of the economy, and there was already a house on it, so we didn't have to pay impact fees, and there was no drainage fees, so that also was a good thing, but it's also very close to my university. The build itself, total is $287,000.
Fabulous. Yes, very good. All right. Anybody have a question, as long as we're on his right now? If there's anything in particular we can come back to in a few minutes. So unmute yourself if you have a quick question, because I can't see the chat. Okay. All right. Think about it. If there's some more you've got, we'll come back in a few minutes, and we'll move on at this point. Thank you. That is, I can't wait to see it. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to do the Women of the North Dakota oil field. And I made a quick little video for you to show you. Jason and I spent 3 years here about 6 years ago, and recently came back.
So you rent it, flip it, or run National Road Show. And I'm Terry Record.
Hi, I'm Jason Northogan.
And we are featuring the North Dakota oil field tiny house movement. And so bear with us and explore North Dakota with us in the dead of the winter. And behind us, you can see a sign. It's called ND Indoor RV Park.
Whoop.
North Dakota oil field tiny house movement. And so bear with us and explore North Dakota with us in the dead of the winter. And behind us, you can see a sign. It's called ND Indoor RV Park. And that is the world's only indoor RV park. We're going to show you where we found a place for our RV, because we travel the United States doing rent it, flip it, or run national road shows. So bear with us and explore. So the tiny house movement in the oil field is by necessity. You know, what happened is there's lots of oil. This area was predominantly ranching. And so as it boomed, and our economy also plummeted about the same time period. A lot of people moved out here from other states looking for work, looking for good wages. I loved the people we met during that time period because they were genuine. They all came from different walks of life, and they were doing something different to make money for their family. As far as housing goes, there is a shortage of available low priced housing. So that's why we're seeing lots of these tiny house options, because the people who get here, they don't have a place to live. Now, there are people who decide, okay, this is it, I'm going to be here full time, I'm staying. And those people, they go buy a house. And so the housing prices have doubled and quadrupled since the early days. And there is building going on, but they're not building things for the lower price range. You can see more housing. There's a couple buildings. They do a lot of aluminum buildings here. Over here, we're going to have there's an RV. When we used to be here, those RV parks in the winter were totally filled, but because they have had time, we haven't been in the oil field for 6 years now. They have had time, and they have built new housing. And so not all the RV parks in the winter are. Here's another form of a tiny house living in the oil field. So they have luxury cabins, and they're currently filled. I did call on them a couple days ago, and they had an opening for an hour, and it was refilled. There aren't too many of these. This is the only one exactly like this in this area currently that they're kind of woodsy inside. They're not a lot of square footage. They've got a 1-bedroom generally. The 1-bedrooms are running about $1,550. They have a front porch and a back porch. It's kind of nice. It looks over a field, there's still other activity. You can see there's other tiny house housing across the way there, and those are little places they put up for guys to stay in as well. So this is another option, and they do provide furniture with these. Coming up is what people might call a man camp. A lot of times it's men, but they might have their families here as well. And a lot of times what some of the bigger companies do is they rent a space like this for their guys to be able to sleep. So they just kind of threw these up, manufactured homes, and added a deck, and they're occupied. And my guess is these are probably furnished as well. So this is one option people have in the oil field. Originally, when everyone was in the oil field, there wasn't a lot of housing, so we saw the biggest part of people were in RVs, out in the middle of the field in the winter, camping. And so there are still people doing that, not quite as much as before.
All right, ladies, Jocelyn and Laurel, if you can unmute yourselves. And I'd like to introduce my women of the oil field. I have my friend that I met in the oil field, Laurel King, and Jocelyn Nordhaugen, my daughter. And hey, girls. Hey, Laurel, how are you today?
I'm good, Terry. How are you?
Good, good. So, Laura, you want to tell us a little bit about your experience in the oil field and, what you saw and how it was for you?
We came from Colorado, where, it's cold in Colorado, and moved to North Dakota and learned a whole new meaning of the word cold. And so we found out early that when you live in an RV or a tiny house, it is imperative that you make sure that the underside of your dwelling is very well insulated, and do anything that you can to keep it warm underneath there, because when that freezes underneath, everything freezes, and your life, you learn things that you've never known before when everything is frozen. So that was one of the things that I learned. I do think that if I were to ever have to do it again, I believe I would try to get one of those tankless water heaters to put in a small house. If you've got, men don't care as much, but women do, especially if you have to go through 3 shower cycles just to get your shampoo and conditioner out of your hair. So just little things like that men generally don't think about, but women do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you came from a big house like I did when we both came out there. And
Yes.
What's kind of interesting, I thought, was how, even though you have all this stuff, how little of it you really actually use every day. And,
Right.
I brought too much. I find every time I do that, I actually, there's less that I actually need. But
Right. And also you learn that if you're going to be someplace like that for any length of time, like over your birthday or anniversary or Valentine's Day or Christmas, whatever, you learn really fast to tell family members and friends, we appreciate the thought, but please don't send gifts. We just don't have the room. And if somebody sends you flowers, the smell in that small place becomes overpowering, or they'll send like a large crock pot or coffee pot thinking, this will be nice, but there's no room to store it. And it just send a card, a nice card, and the appreciation is there. And we would really appreciate it if you didn't send a gift. I think when we left, we had about $1,300 worth of Starbucks gift cards.
Yeah, I didn't figure that one out, but yeah, I really enjoyed
close by.
when it was an adventure. We did this kind of in the middle of the real estate downturn, and that's how I met Laurel. And I don't know if Jocelyn's on or not. I don't see her. Jocelyn, are you there? But her dog was sick, so I'm not sure where she is. But but what I found was the people we met there were eclectic. But they were all there for a common purpose, and they had all given up something else to be there. And I felt the people were really interesting and genuine, and I really enjoyed that. I found it very refreshing.
Well, I can remember the holidays, and I think your oven was bigger than everybody else. And so each tiny house, each family that lived where we lived would be in charge of either the rolls or the turkey or ham.
That's right.
Somebody would make vegetables, and then when the guys would get a chance, they would run the truck through, and if they didn't have time to come in and sit down and eat a holiday dinner, and they didn't have to be part of our community, it was just the truck drivers that you knew didn't have any place to go, when we would say, stop by the trailer, and we'll fill you a plate. If you can't sit down, we'll fill a plate for you and meet you at the truck. And yes, that definitely is community style living.
Yeah. So anyway, lifelong friends. And I remember, Landa and I got up on Easter morning and put Easter eggs at the trucks. I'm sure they had no idea how this colored egg ended up on their trucks. But anyway, but it was very, very cold, and you're right. And it was but I'm real thankful to have made your friendship. Anything else you wanted to add?
I'm glad that it's you up there, not me.
I'm up in North Dakota right now. Jason's helping set up an oil company for a gentleman. So,
and I'm in Tucson right now, and it's 80 degrees outside.
Yeah. So very good. Well, thank you, Laurel, for sharing with us. And we're going to move on. And if you guys have questions, she'll be around in a few minutes as well. So with that, I believe next up is my good friend, Demetria Webster. And Demetria, you're still here? I think you are. You want to...
I am.
Yeah, let's see.
Hi.
I think I had a little... Oh, here it is. One sec.
Yep.
That got out of order. I'll just play this for you, and then I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay.
All right. So with that, I'll introduce Demetria, and go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Demetria Webster, and I have a residential rehabbing and rental property business called G Harvest Homes, which is how I connected to Terry Records. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something that is a new passion for me. Yes, I love renovating homes. I love the real estate investing business, but the homelessness issue that I have seen has been, it just really spoke to me that there's definitely a need to figure out how to solve the problem, if not reduce the amount of homelessness that we see in the area where we live. So I am from Seattle. I currently live in San Francisco Bay Area. My section is for Los Angeles, but I live in Seattle and the Bay Area. And when I go home to Seattle and I'm driving around here in the Bay Area, the homelessness issue is a glaring problem. Like, you really cannot get away from it, no matter what your socioeconomic status is. You see it when you exit the freeways. You see it when you're driving in, for the most part, metropolitan areas. where you see tents that have been on the streets for weeks or months. And it just seems like it's a growing problem that's very complex, but we need to figure out how to solve it. And so I just wanted to just go through a couple of stats that I pulled up about, Seattle is booming. They have great economies. They have, lower than the national unemployment rate for the United States, which is already very low, relatively speaking. These areas have higher than the median salary for the United States. As I have here, the median salary is about $55,000. In Seattle, it's $73,000. The Bay Area, it's almost $86,000, and maybe even higher. Of course, these are 2018 stats. So, there's lots of work out there. There's, lots of money being made. But what we're seeing is that money is just not enough to cover the growing housing prices in these areas. And just to show you a quick snapshot, the median home value is $764,000 in Seattle. The average 2-bedroom apartment is $1,900 a month. In the Bay Area, the median home value is $820,000, with a median 2-bedroom apartment being $3,300 per month. So the jobs are there, the money's being made, but it's not quite enough to cover the housing prices and costs and have to live a decent lifestyle that you think that these salaries really deserve. So, as a result of that, we're seeing a lot of people on the street because they're not making these median salaries. They're not able to afford the houses and the apartments that are available to them. And so just, quickly a snapshot of the homeless population. In a single night, there's been roughly 12,000 people that are counted who are homeless. And that's in a given night. Of course, it's not the most accurate because I'm sure that there are probably more people who haven't been included in this count in Seattle. And of those 12,000, roughly 47% do not have shelter. In the Bay Area, roughly 14,000 people have been counted as being homeless in a given night. And 63% of those individuals are unsheltered. So this is a serious problem. Again, very complex, but I think that there might be some opportunities to solve it. And that's why I'm here to talk about a potential solution with tiny houses. Now, it's not the only solution, but I think it's one that I have started looking into. I should have prefaced before I started talking that, this is something that it's new to me. So I'm gathering the data. I'm just trying to understand the problem and how perhaps this tiny house movement can help solve that problem. From my very limited research, Seattle is really at the forefront of using the tiny home movement to help homeless families. I found a quote in Seattle Times where in 2018, there were 9 sanctioned city house villages available in the Seattle area that's serving roughly 650, 660 people. And 33% of the households that are in these communities have left to go on to more permanent housing, which is higher than the homeless shelter solution or even a more enhanced shelter model. So what it seems like is that this tiny house, even if it's a temporary solution, is really helping quite a few families find more permanent housing, which I think is a wonderful thing. So, is it a solution for other cities, right? That's really going to be a debate that I think is going to be going on for quite some time as to whether the tiny house movement could be a temporary or a permanent solution. as I showed before, that it seems to be working quite well as a temporary solution. I think there's also opportunities for a more permanent option as well. And, and deciding whether it's temporary or permanent, how should these tiny houses be designed? Should they have a kitchen and bath, or should there be a communal kitchen and bath in these villages? Also, is it going to design amenities can these villages offer to folks who are living in these environments? Also, I recognize that there are some obstacles that come with utilizing the tiny home concept and movement to solve this issue. And there's a lot more work to do, but, first off, location, right? A lot of folks will think it's a great idea, but I don't want it in my backyard. I want to make sure I maintain my property value or, the reputation of my neighborhood. So it's finding the right places where homeless folks can actually benefit from this situation, in an area where homeowners can also accommodate their. And that, as Terry Records mentioned earlier, is the zoning laws and ordinances, ensuring that we can work with cities and the county municipalities to allow for these kinds of villages or developments to exist with existing traditional structures and neighborhoods. And then lastly, the social challenges that come with building these villages. I just have a quick snapshot of an article from the Seattle Times where there's been some infighting at some of these villages, where there's been reported use of drugs and alcohol and whatnot, and how to manage that so that these villages can exist or coexist with existing developments and traditional communities. So there's a lot that we have to do to see if this tiny house movement can truly be a solution for homelessness. I think it's a great opportunity to try. And I've taken the interest in finding out how that can work and how my business can support this as well. On to the next slide, please.
I got one more.
This
Nope.
one last. Oh, maybe not. Okay. So, okay, sorry. So, if you are interested in, donating or working with the city or government municipalities to figure out how to make this an option, please feel free to reach out to me. Also in the Seattle area, there is a group that's taken over these villages called the Low Income Housing Institute at lihi.org. You can donate to this organization. I think they even have volunteer opportunities as well. And if there is interest, I suggest that you act and inquire and research and do what you can to help those who do not have roofs over their heads and who are sleeping out in the cold at night. That's all I have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, and so we'll open it up to questions in a second. So I had a few tips, and some problems arise, like I said, with the authorities. You've got to check with all the authorities before you start to and be flexible and think creatively. To basically, like I said, communities are bending rules as we go, but you have to be diligent and work with them, right? So living in a tiny house will likely reduce your debt and allow you some financial freedom to pursue your passions. And you can weather ups and downs financially. Being persistent is key. Building one can be tedious. Lay a good foundation. You have to think about whether you want to do it with the community. If you have like-minded friends or acquaintances, you may be able to share workloads in some of the work as far as getting things approved or building, all those kinds of things. So it has lots of advantages to going smaller. You can investigate a wide variety of materials. You can focus on design. Sometimes the space is so small, you've got to use transforming furniture. I know there's a lot of furniture that can be a bed. It can be, you know, your dresser can be a bed, all kinds of things, so that you don't need as many things as you think you need in order to go small, right? They can be buses, yurts, they can be house trucks. You've got to consider storage and your interaction with space if you're going to think about going small for yourself. And if other people share your tiny space, you've got to figure out ways so that everybody can have some alone time. So you want to think about some of these things. And a lot of this tips on this handout, I'm not going to go through all in detail. I can email it to you. Now, some of you may have come in through Facebook instead of my full registration. And if you did, you may want to email me your email address, because I can give you these tips, and I've got another worksheet for you to work through if you want to consider going tiny yourself. At the end, it's a self-reflection deal. And so email me terry.records@gmail.com, and I can send you the slideshow and the handouts. Now, one of the things I found going small, like I said, I've had 4,000 square feet and an 18-car garage and a couple different houses. And now I still need to go smaller, but I'm a lot less than I was. One way to look at going smaller, if you're still in the big mode, right, is the 80-20 principle. I mentioned it before, but you want to look at, most of us only use 20% of our space or 20% of our things. It's everything in life. 20% is what we actually use and touch. So if you think about that, then you start, you can downsize. You can use less space. I don't need an extra bedroom for my office. My office can be twofold, right? It can be my living room or my whatever. How can you have multiple uses of the same space or your things, right? Technically, I still wear the same things over and over, and the other 80% of what I have, I really don't need. Or you can rent. You can, you know, if you have a fancy event, you don't need to own everything. You can rent things, right? So another way to do it is called the box method. If you're going to downsize, and that is to box everything up, and at the end of a month, figure out, you know, you can only take out the things you're going to use. And so at the end of the month, you've got it boxed up already. You can get rid of it, or maybe you're going to give yourself 3 or 6 months. Now, another way to downsize is something called the 3 piles method. And one is and the whole thing with the 3 piles method is to go fast. You only are allowed like 5 seconds per item, right? And I take it, I'll say, okay, this is my closet day. I'm doing the closet today, and I'm allowed to touch it for 5 seconds. So it's my first interaction. Am I keeping it? Am I donating it? Am I goodwilling it, right? And so I have to put it in one of the 3 piles. The other method is called the one in, one out method. And this is one Jason likes me to uphold, but I don't do very well. And that's when I buy something new, I'm supposed to get rid of something else. And so I don't do that. I end up doing, you know, the 5-1 method. But that's another method that they talk about. So I found those out when I was doing some research. You want to design your own tiny life, right? Figure out what your mission statement is. Find out, reflect, and figure out what is it that motivates you. What is your dream, right? And then surround yourself with like-minded people, people that understand what it is you're going through. And then you want to goal plan this tiny life. It's you know, I've been downsizing for about 6 years now, and this week I'm about to downsize again, and I still have a couple storage rooms that I shouldn't have, but I have a lot less than I had before. So my life is getting more simple as I go, and I actually like it that way. It's not for everybody though, right? But you have to start. You have to take your first step and decide what it is that you want, and then you know, bring it down into today, into taking some steps to move you forward towards those goals. And as I said, this is the worksheet that if you email at terry.records@gmail.com, I'll give you. It's evaluating your daily life. It's just a self-reflection worksheet that I created to help people if they are interested in downsizing, that kind of a thing. So what's next? I mean, the movement is about you. It's about whatever it is that you desire. It's not just a one-size-fits-all deal. And so you want to find like-minded people who are pursuing, have the same interests that you do, right? So Google it, and you'll find lots of things. Look up Facebook groups and join some groups. But it's still, like I said, it's still in the grassroots, even a couple years later. But things are progressing, and people are getting things done, and they're living this way, right? So I do offer real estate investment coaching. And so I help people build wealth with real estate, as I said earlier. If you have any desire with that, I do individualized, personalized coaching and a year-long program helping people build wealth with real estate. You can email me at terry.records@gmail.com to do that, or you can set up an appointment in my schedule at terryandjason.com/apply to talk some more about your personal situation. I'm happy to meet with you at any time, and welcome the call. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat again. If anybody has any questions. Square footage calculated. I think technically you on a tiny house, when people are calculating the size of your house, they're going by your outside walls, right? And so it's like, what's your outside 2 walls, and you multiply that. So if you had a loft, you'd have a little bit of space, but you really can't stand up in there. And I don't know that there's any big rule for sure about how that's calculated. But for example, my 8 by 10 square foot little cabin that I'm going to put an outdoor kitchen on, that would be 80 square feet, 8 by 10, right? And it has a little loft, but it's about this wide. I can put a futon mattress in it. And so I'm not going to count that for square footage there. It's however you want to count your square footage. Anybody else have questions? You can unmute yourself. I think our panel's pretty much still here too, or what else are people interested in doing? I'm sure I didn't cover it all. Great. Anybody? Hi, Shirley. Georgie. I see some familiar names there. I don't see faces on the screen, but I see familiar people. Awesome. All right. Well, I do have a recording. I know some of you, Ivan, you came in late. And if you would like a recording of it too, maybe shoot me an email and I can email you a copy. That way you can see the rest of the presentation where Dr. Thomas presented the Hobbit house and Demetria the homeless. And we did the Oilfield and lots of other things. So if you'd like that, shoot me an email, terry.records@gmail.com. And thank you all for participating in our panel today. See you later.